Chris woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. The dream had felt so real, too real. In it, the world was ending. The sky was on fire, and people were running in every direction, screaming, crying. But the worst part wasn't the chaos or the destruction. It was the fact that he was alone. Anna wasn't there. He didn't know where she was, and as the ground shook and the world crumbled around him, he died without ever finding her. The dream lingered in his mind like a shadow, refusing to fade. He sat up in bed, running a hand through his messy hair, and stared at the wall. It was just a dream, he told himself. Just his brain playing tricks on him. But it felt like more than that. It felt like a warning. His thoughts drifted to Anna. They hadn't spoken in days, not since their stupid fight. He couldn't even remember what it was about now, something trivial, something meaningless. But it had been enough to drive a wedge between them, and now, with the dream still fresh in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to see her. He needed to make things right. Chris got dressed quickly, his hands trembling as he fumbled with his shoes. He didn't know what the dream meant, if it meant anything at all, but he couldn't ignore it. He had to find Anna. As he stepped outside, the world seemed eerily quiet. The streets were empty, the usual hum of life replaced by an unsettling silence. Chris quickened his pace, his heart racing as he made his way to Anna's apartment. He was almost there when he heard it, the news, blaring from a nearby radio. Confirmed reports of a massive meteor on a collision course with Earth. Experts estimate we have only 3 days before impact. Authorities are urging everyone to remain calm, but… Chris froze, his blood running cold. The dream. It wasn't just a dream. It was real. The world was ending. For a moment, he stood there, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. But then he thought of Anna, and his resolve hardened. He didn't care about the meteor. He didn't care about the end of the world. All he cared about was her. He found her at the park, sitting on their favorite bench beneath the old oak tree. She looked up as he approached, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, relief, maybe. Or fear. Chris didn't know. All he knew was that he needed to be with her. "Chris," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Did you hear about the meteor?" He nodded, sitting down beside her. "Yeah. I heard." Anna looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Chris reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Her fingers were cold, but they fit perfectly in his, just like they always had. "Me too," he said. "But, we're together. That's what matters." Anna looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "What do we do now?" Chris took a deep breath, his chest tightening with emotion. "Well," he said, forcing a small smile, "since it's our last nights, let's make the most of the time we have together." Anna nodded, a fragile smile tugging at her lips. "Okay. Together." The next few days passed in a blur. Chris and Anna spent every moment together, clinging to each other as the world around them unraveled. They walked through the empty streets, hand in hand, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of the approaching meteor. They talked about everything and nothing, about their dreams, their fears, their favorite memories. They laughed, they cried, they held each other close. On the final night, they returned to the park, to their bench beneath the oak tree. The sky was a deep, ominous red, the air thick with the scent of smoke and ash. The meteor was close now, its light casting an eerie glow over everything. Chris and Anna sat side by side, their hands clasped tightly. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Instead, they simply sat there, watching the sky, their hearts beating in sync. As the meteor grew closer, its light blinding, its heat unbearable, Chris turned to Anna. She looked at him, her eyes filled with love and acceptance. "I'm glad it's you," she said softly. "I'm glad it's us." Chris smiled, his thumb brushing over the back of her hand. Me too. And as the world erupted around them, as the ground shook and the sky burned, Chris and Anna smiled. They smiled because they had found each other. They smiled because they had made the most of the time they had. And they smiled because, in the end, they were together. And that was enough.